From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today has been provided by the following. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont. Online at wvhtf.org. Connecting West Virginia families and businesses through high-speed internet services. Learn more about connecting at frontier.com.
At the Legislature today, a lot of bills means a lot of amendments and a lot of debate on the floors of the House and Senate today. We'll have full reports on all the action. And Governor Tomblin joins us tonight to discuss the progress of his legislative agenda on the Legislature Today. And good evening, I'm Beth Voorhees. Two bills highlighted the floor session in the House Delegates today. The bill to expand the Home Rule pilot program was debated after an anti-gun control amendment yesterday from Delegate Patrick Lane. Also widely discussed was Governor Tomblin's prison overcrowding bill, which was met with 4 amendments from House Minority Leader Tim Armstead. Dave Mistich has this report.
Senate Bill 435, which would expand and extend the Home Rule pilot program, was on third reading and up for passage. The program offered by the bill would allow more cities around the state more power at the local level through July 1st, 2019. Delegate Jim Morgan of Cabell County explained a few significant changes to the bill.
As amended on the floor yesterday, also states that cities may not enact ordinances pertaining to marriage and divorce laws, restrict the rights of a person to purchase, possess, transfer, own, carry, transport, sell, or store firearms.
As was noted by Delegate Morgan, the bill was amended on the floor yesterday by Delegate Patrick Lane to restrict participants in the Home Rule program from passing gun control ordinances. The only exception would be laws that apply to carrying a firearm in municipal buildings. Delegate Misha Poore of Kanawha County took specific issue with Lane's amendment in regards to her position on the bill as a whole.
The amendment that has been added to this piece of legislation goes against the very essence of what the clear intent of this bill is meant to do, and it is counterproductive. The bottom line is this: either we trust the municipalities that we all represent to do what we trust them to do, or we don't.
Delegate Nancy Guthrie, also of Kanawha County, echoed Delegate Poore's thoughts on the bill after Lane's amendment.
We infected a good piece of legislation with an extraneous poison pill. The gun provision has absolutely no room in Home Rule. I don't think that you can extend rights to a municipality and then bite their hand off whenever you decide that it's not going the way you want it to.
Guthrie also argued that the bill wasn't backed by law enforcement, but rather the NRA. After a few short words of support from Delegate Kevin Craig of Cabell County, Delegate Lane closed the debate on Senate Bill 435 without noting his amendment.
5 years ago, when we started the pilot project, I had reservations about it, I'll admit to you. But I've seen the way that it has worked in the 4 cities that have been involved. Now, there have been some issues with some of the choices that they have made, but I think the lady from the 37th is exactly right. This is about jobs. It's about giving municipalities the ability to structure their finances in a way that can attract jobs to our local areas.
The Home Rule bill passed 95-3. Delegates Poore, Guthrie, and Stephen Skinner of Jefferson County voted against the bill. While many bills on second reading were debated as various amendments were presented, Governor Tomblin's bill, which seeks to relieve prison overcrowding, was the next piece of major legislation. House Minority Leader Tim Armstead presented 4 amendments to Senate Bill 371, most notably one that would strike down the provision in the governor's bill that would allow for the 6-month early release of nonviolent offenders.
This bill allows anyone to be released up to 6 months, if the judge determines that, for any crime except certain ones that are listed in 61. There are a huge number of crimes that are not listed in 61 that this would allow early release of. throughout the code there are felonies that this would allow early release of prisoners. What I'm trying to do with this amendment is simply say two things. One, we want to allow supervision of anyone. There shouldn't have to be a release early to supervise people. So this would allow for nonviolent, for all the other offenders, and when I say nonviolent, I'm taking their definition, which I don't think is a very good definition of nonviolent, but it would allow supervision of everyone. It would allow nonviolent offenders to be treated just like violent offenders. They would lose 6 months of their good time served. They'd get out at the same time. They would be supervised for 6 months. And it would be treated basically the same way that we treat the violent offenders in this bill.
Delegate Craig spoke in opposition to Armstead's amendment.
I really think you get into semantics, you talk about early release. You think about the good time provision in our current code where you can get up to half your sentence reduced for good behavior. We're not calling that early release. Okay, what we are trying to accomplish with this bill, and we've heard from the Justice Center of the Council of State Governments, is the reduction of recidivism and the devastating impact that's having on our state. Okay, when we look at providing intense supervision for those that have been convicted, if we can reduce the number of individuals that go back to jail, whether you're saying that's an early release, which again I do not agree with, I call it a better prescription for solving what oftentimes comes down to a drug abuse problem that we all know exists in this state.
After questions and comments from Delegates Tim Manchin of Marion County and Justin Markham of Mingo County, Armstead closed the debate.
There is simply no justification for letting people out of prison 6 months early. The only justification when I ask people that they say is the cost savings. And I ask you, is that worth it? Maybe you think it is. I happen to not think it's worth it. I happen to think it is not worth saving a couple $1 million to put people in danger.
Ultimately, Armstead's amendment to remove the provision that would have allowed for the 6-month early release for nonviolent offenders failed 37-61. The House Minority Leader's other 3 amendments were also rejected, one of which called for monthly reports on the 6-month early release program. Those reports would have been sent to the governor and the legislature and by request to individual members of the legislature. Another sought to create a sentencing commission to ensure fair and uniform sentencing across the state. The prison overcrowding bill will be up for a floor vote tomorrow. For the Legislature Today, I'm Dave Mistich in the House of Delegates.
The Senate concurred with House amendments on a number of their bills this morning that will now be sent for the governor's approval. As the session begins to wind down and more bills are sent over for their approval, senators will be called upon to play a part in a different type of committee, a conference committee, to work out the differences between the House and Senate. Ashton Mara has more about today's actions in the Senate.
The Senate passed 3 bills today that originated in the House, including House Bill 2979. The bill, which deals with the regulation of broadband expansion projects across the state, received debate on the floor yesterday, but unanimously passed today. An amendment to the bill requires the 15-member state broadband council to commit grant funding to areas without access first. In a long list of bills on second reading, a proposed amendment for House Bill 2508 saw significant discussion. This is the governor's bill to increase the minimum cost from $25 million, as it is now, to $75 million for projects using tax increment financing. Senator Dave Seipolt tried to amend the bill.
House Bill 2508 will increase that threshold for $25 million to $75 million, which is probably not a bad idea. However, I would say that in West Virginia, one size does not fit all. And my amendment simply would provide a 2-tier system that would change the capital investment threshold for all counties and municipalities of Class 1 to $75 million, but leave the rest of the counties and municipalities at $25 million.
Senate Finance Chair Senator Roman Prezioso, a strong proponent of this session's bill proposing the creation of a tax increment financing district in Morgantown, urged the rejection of the amendment.
The intent of this particular bill, when we look at large-scale economic development projects, is to expound on existing businesses, offer some creativity, as you saw in the Morgantown TIF, building roads and interchanges and things like this. A lot of times the intention of a small tax increment finance TIF is detrimental to local businesses. A big box store comes into a small community, you've reached the $25 million limit. And so it has an adverse effect on the mom and pop stores.
But Senator Clark Barnes disagreed. Barnes from Randolph County said while it may be a small amount for a large city, to a rural area, a $25 million investment can drastically change the local economy for the better.
$25 million is a heck of a big project in most of our communities. We can name county after county, and if we have the opportunity for $25 million in development, it goes a long way, because that $25 million development is going to end up multiplying itself many, many times. What this bill does without the amendment is that takes away the ability of 50 counties within this state to participate in the TIF program.
Seipold again stood to say the opportunity for economic advancement in some of the state is less with a minimum project cost so high, but the amendment failed on a voice vote.
As the session comes to a close, another step in the lawmaking process comes into play. Conference committees. Those committees are made up of members of both chambers to discuss rejected amendments to bills.
One such committee was appointed by Senate President Jeff Kessler today for House Bill 2585. The bill would extend the length of time a person has to appeal an increase in property tax after an assessment. The Senate's version of the bill would extend it from 5 to 8 business days, but the House rejected the amendment and asked the Senate to withdraw the change.
Mr. President, I move the Senate refuse to recede from its amendments to House Bill number 2585 and a conference committee be appointed.
Senators Tucker, Cookman, and Carmichael will participate in that conference committee. A vote in the House today is being predicted to call for the creation of another one of those committees. As the House discussed the extension of the Home Rule pilot project, Delegate Patrick Lane backed an amendment to nullify city gun ordinances. Senator Herb Snyder says specifically Charleston's 3-day waiting period when purchasing handguns. The amended bill passed the House, but Snyder, who led the charge for the extension and expansion of the pilot during interim meetings, says he doesn't expect his fellow senators to accept those changes.
I would anticipate that we will not concur, not particularly and only because of the gun amendment, and everyone needs to know that. There are other provisions that the House has added into the Home Rule bill that I'm not concurring with, and one of those is that the word any city can apply.
Snyder says expanding the program to allow all cities to participate is unrealistic. A volunteer home rule board reviews all of the city's proposed ordinances, and he says couldn't possibly oversee all 230-plus cities in the state. For the Legislature Today, I'm Ashton Mara in the Senate.
An update on the governor's agenda from the governor. First, here's a look at what's coming up in the Senate tomorrow. Among the bills up for passage in the Senate tomorrow, House Bill 2046 to require cell phone companies to release location information of a missing person's cell phone when asked to do so by law enforcement. House Bill 2357, developing an educational diversion program by the Supreme Court for minors engaged in delinquent offenses associated with sexting. the conveying of explicit images via a wireless communication device. House Bill 2399 requires counties to establish livestock committees to handle complaints and investigations of livestock mistreatment. House Bill 2453 to require law enforcement agencies to report a suspected abduction or missing child to the Amber Alert authorities in the initial stages of an investigation to activate the system more quickly. House Bill 2505, the governor's bill to increase civil penalties for pipeline safety violations to make West Virginia law consistent with federal law. The bill clarifies that civil penalties collected by the Public Service Commission are to be submitted into the General Revenue Fund. House Bill 2514, the governor's bill to lower the film industry tax credit from 27 to 21%. House Bill 2548, increasing the criminal penalties for assaults and batteries against athletic officials. House Bill 2579, creating an implementation plan to establish state-specific selenium criteria in the state's waters as it relates to the coal mining industry. And House Bill 2866, increasing from 400 to 500 feet that a firearm can be discharged near a school or place of worship, and that homeowners or authorized guests be allowed to discharge a weapon up to 500 feet from the dwelling. We began our legislative coverage with the governor, and as we near the end of our coverage, we welcome back Governor Earl Ray Tomblin. Thank you so much for coming back.
Thanks for having me, Beth.
I'd like to go through some of your bills, but before we do that, very quickly, when do you expect to announce whether or not West Virginia will expand Medicaid?
We would hope to make that announcement within the next 2 weeks. We're starting to get the preliminary figures in from the actuary now, and it will be my hope by 2 weeks from now that we should be able to make an announcement.
Okay, very good. Moving on to legislation. Senate Bill 355 is on third reading in the House tomorrow. It relates to final wage payments to discharged employees. This is one of your bills. What's the backstory? What's the issue here?
This is a bill. There was a group of small business people that came to me and basically asked that we change this bill. The provisions contained in the current law says if a employee is dismissed, that you must pay them their full wages within 3 days or face triple charges or damages. So, and really for those businesses that don't do their own payroll, or for that matter for state government, a lot of our holidays are on Monday. And if an employee is dismissed on Friday, there's no way to process a check within those 3 days. Basically, this bill says now you got to get the final paycheck to a dismissed employee within 4 working days, which gives the employer a little bit more time to get the check processed.
See, good story. All right. You signed Senate Bill 359 yesterday, the education reform bill, into law. How involved were you in the discussions when this bill was being considered by the Senate?
We my whole staff was involved, and you know, not only with the Senate, the House, the interested parties, the state board. So there was a lot of involvement as we went through the process, and I'm very pleased with the bill. I think it's going to make some major differences in our education system in West Virginia. And the good part is we had support from so many areas, from business, labor, Democrats, Republicans, and you know, it was one that I think people realized we can no longer afford to have the results in our schools that we've been having. We've got to do a better job, have better student outcome, and that's the whole focus of this bill.
Was there ever a time that you were frustrated that you thought they'd never come to a conclusion and that you'd lose the bill?
You know, everyone was very open. They, you know, tempers flared a little bit here and there, but for the most part, people wanted a bill this session, and I think that was the thing that kept the drive out there, that people didn't walk away from the discussion. So, you know, I just applaud everyone involved, you know, who took a part in those discussions, and I think we've really got a good bill here in West Virginia.
Senate Bill 371 relating to prison overcrowding is up for passage in the House tomorrow. Will this solve the problem right away, or when should we see the effects of this bill on our prison population?
I think that it will solve the problem. This same approach has been taken in many other states with very similar problems. Some of them, with like Texas, was severely overcrowded, and you know, they now have vacancies in prisons closed because they took this approach. And one of the main concepts is to make sure that once prisoners are released from the state's custody, that they have supervision. because what we have the big problem with is recidivism, going back to the same environment that got them into trouble to start with. You know, this hopefully will keep them out of that kind of environment and keep them from becoming recommitting crimes in West Virginia.
Your bill to really essentially close the industrial home for youth at Salem, make it the Salem Correctional Center, and put adults in will help with this, right?
Absolutely. We should be able rather quickly to house between 300 and 400 adult inmates at the Salem facility. So that will cut down on some of the overcrowding we have, especially in our regional jails.
Okay. What happens to the youth that are at Salem?
We have several youth homes around, about a dozen youth homes around the state. We do have vacancies there. We're in the process of determining where those students who are now at Salem Industrial Home for Youth, where we can place them within the system. So, yeah, we do have facilities and beds available for our young people.
Any reservations to that property will have to be made?
Very little. It's very close to being ready to move into now.
Also on third reading in the Senate tomorrow, House Bill 2505, increasing civil penalties imposed by the Public Service Commission for pipeline safety violations. I was surprised at how low the penalties were in the law.
They were very low. They had not been addressed for many years, and obviously the explosion in the Sissonville area was the one that brought that to the forefront. And basically this brings us into compliance with federal law now as far as the safety goes, and it's a substantial fine for those companies not maintaining their pipeline. It'll be a $200,000 fine for those in violation.
And it goes into the General Revenue Fund?
Goes into the General Revenue Fund.
Improving enforcement of drugged driving offenses. This is on the agenda tomorrow in Senate Judiciary. The problem, you probably know this, but the problem the House had was, well, at what level do you set? We know that .08 is the level for alcohol, but we don't know what the level for drugs are.
That is one of the questions. Most states have some form of a drugged driving bill. And obviously, to drive now when you're impaired for any reasons, it's a crime already. But you've probably heard local police chiefs and so forth say that probably 75% of the people that they pull over that are impaired are drugged driving. So, it is a problem, and that's what we're trying to address with this bill.
Okay. One last one here, House Bill 2590. It's on second reading in the Senate, creating a public nonprofit corporation. Well, let's call it the Land Stewardship Act.
Right.
What does this bill do?
We have a lot of so-called brownfields in West Virginia, that sites that have been used for various things, basically have been polluted one way or another, and we have a shortage of building sites in West Virginia. Basically, this will create a nonprofit entity that the owner of one of those brownfield properties that has been rehabilitated can put this property into this corporation. They would then hold and I guess prevent or work to prevent any future user of that land from disturbing the rehabilitation to that property that's been done. Basically taking property that's not usable today, turn it into building sites for future business growth.
All right. Governor Earl Ray Tomblin, a good session, and I thank you very much for coming back to the legislature today.
Thanks so much for having me, Beth.
And here's a look at what's coming up in the House tomorrow. Among the bills up for passage in the House tomorrow, Senate Bill 65 to treat natural resources police like all other law enforcement and exempt their retirement from state income tax. Senate Bill 202 creating the Spay and Neuter Assistance Program in the Department of Agriculture to accept grants and donations to allow more animals to be spayed and neutered to reduce pet shelter population and euthanasia rates. Senate Bill 355, the governor's bill relating to final wage payment of discharged employees. Senate Bill 371, the governor's bill to relieve prison overcrowding. Senate Bill 407 to require cellular and telephone companies to provide the names, addresses, and telephone numbers of its customers to the Bureau for Child Support Enforcement when requested. Senate Bill 437, regulating commercial dog breeding operations. Senate Bill 454, providing a framework for taxing alternative motor fuels. Senate Bill 464, regulating tanning facilities. Senate Bill 481, to clarify the process for voluntary commitment and transport of juveniles in need of mental health or addiction treatment, and provide for payment of juvenile mental health treatment when the individual is not covered by insurance. Senate Bill 515, allowing vehicles to display GPS and mapping devices. Senate Bill 663, creating the West Virginia Feed to Achieve Act to allow public-private partnerships to provide a minimum of 2 free meals daily to elementary school students, with an eye toward eventually providing free school meals to all students. And Senate Bill 664, adopting the 7.5% budget cuts to certain state agencies as requested by the governor. This has been the Legislature Today. We'll be back with our final episode of the session tomorrow as we wrap up our coverage of the first regular session of the 81st West Virginia Legislature. I'm Beth Voorhees. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Today has been provided by the following. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont. Online at wvhtf.org. Connecting West Virginia families and businesses through high-speed internet services. Learn more about connecting at frontier.com.